Humankind's obsession with flight. The history.
Since the dawn of time, humans have dreamed of flying with the birds. From Leonardo da Vinci's ornithopter in 1485 to the first hot air balloon in 1783, or George Cayley's gliders in 1799, they all had one thing in common. They dreamed of flying. 1891, German engineer Otto Lilienthal studied aerodynamics and worked to design a glider that would fly. He achieved this and became the first person to design a glider that could fly a person long distances. He was fascinated by the ideal of flight, and based on his studies of birds and how they fly, he wrote a book on aerodynamics that was published in 1889. And this text was actually used by the Wright brothers as the basis for their designs. After more than 2,500 flights, he was killed when he lost control. Also in 1891, Samuel Langley, an astronomer, realized that power was needed to help a man fly. So he built a model of a plane which he called an aerodrome that included a steam-powered engine. In 1891, his model flew for 3/4 of a mile before running out of fuel. Langley went on to receive a $50,000 grant to build a full-size version, but unfortunately, it was too heavy and couldn't fly. He was very disappointed and eventually gave up trying to fly altogether. His major contributions to flight involved attempts at adding a power plant to a glider. He was also well known as the director of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. Then in 1894, Octavian Chanute published Progress in Flying Machines. It gathered and analyzed all the technical knowledge that could be found about aviation accomplishments. It included all of the world's aviation pioneers. The Wright brothers actually used this book as a basis for much of their experiments. Chanute was also in contact with the Wright brothers and often commented on their progress. Orville and Wilbur Wright were very deliberate in their quest for flight. First, they read about all of the early developments of flight. They then decided to make a small contribution to the study of flight control by twisting their wings in flight. They then began to test their ideas with the kite. They learned about the wind and how it would help with the flight and how it could affect the surfaces once up in the air. The next step was to test the shapes of the gliders, much like George Cayley did when he was testing the many different shapes that would fly. They actually spent 3 years testing and learning about how gliders could be controlled at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. They actually designed and used a wind tunnel to test the shapes of the wings and the tails of the gliders. Then in 1902, with a perfected glider shape, they turned their attention to how to create a propulsion system that would create the thrust needed to fly. The early engine that they designed generated almost 12 horsepower. That's the same power as 2 hand-propelled lawnmower engines. Yeah, you heard that right. To their amazement, the flyer lifted from level ground to the north of Big Kill Devil Hill, North Carolina, at 10:35 a.m. on December 17, 1903. Orville piloted the plane, which weighed about 600 pounds. The very first heavier-than-air flight traveled 120 feet in 12 seconds. The 2 brothers took turns flying that day, with the fourth and last flight covering 850 feet in 59 seconds. But the flyer was unstable and very hard to control. The brothers returned to Dayton, Ohio, where they worked for 2 more years, perfecting their design. Finally, on October 5, 1905, Wilbur piloted the Flyer 3 for 39 minutes and about 24 miles of circles around Huffman Prairie. He flew the first practical airplane until it ran out of gas. Humankind was now able to fly. During the next century, many new airplanes and engines were developed to help transport people, luggage, cargo, military personnel, and weapons. But all of these 20th century advances wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the American brothers from Ohio and their first airplane. Nor can we forget about all of the men that sacrificed their well-being for the pursuit of flight. Just imagine if all of those people wouldn't have taken that leap of faith, where we'd be today. Remember, if it's more interesting, you can find it here. Make sure to like, comment, and hit follow. Thanks.